Simone, it's not like this is new, this idea that President Erdogan wants to cut interest rates. So what's special specifically about the comments he made on Sunday?
Yeah, Danny, no, it's not. This is something he said many times. But these comments yesterday directly undermining what the central bank was talking about late last week when it cut interest rates again, saying that there's limited extra room to cut rates further. And that was something that could have had a stabilizing impact on the lira. And instead, we're hearing from Erdogan saying more interest rate cuts ahead. Also, there were some comments from a prominent business group called TÜSİAD calling for Erdogan and his government not naming Erdogan specifically, to stop this experimental monetary policy that he's been advocating. But instead, he fired back yesterday and said this group just wants to see me out of power. And so escalating this dispute between prominent business leaders and the Erdogan government.
So not being swayed from his path of calling for cutting of interest rates, what have you heard then from analysts about how far the lira can weaken from this point?
Well, Danny, Sami Shar of Lombard Odier&C was on the program during Daybreak Middle East, and he said there is no floor on the Turkish lira. It can only get worse until we see some kind of policy shift. Now, many analysts really want the central bank to come in and hike rates. They see that as the most likely possibility for ending this downward slide in the lira. But clearly, Erdogan not on board with that and willing to fire or get rid of folks in the government who seem to disagree. We've seen the government, the central bank rather, doing some intervention in the market to try and stop the slide in the lira, but so far that hasn't worked. And so there's only really more bearish moments ahead as we look into 2022 and as people sort of move to the dollar more because the lira is just weakening without a seeming floor.
Yeah, dollar lira at 17.4 at this moment. Simone, how is this playing out domestically?
Well, you know, this whole policy is really focused or seen as being focused at Erdogan's re-election chances. So the idea being you do this huge amount of growth, even to the point of overheating, you stimulate job creation, and therefore people will vote for Erdogan and his AKP party in elections that have to happen by June 2023. The risk, however, for Erdogan is that the opposition unites behind these concerns about these rising inflation. You see people standing in bread lines, people out of work, people unable to purchase the goods that they need from abroad because their lira just isn't worth the same amount anymore. And so we're starting to see some of the opposition parties try and come together, even though they have very different views on a lot of theological things and a lot of other things about the state, but agree that the economy is an important issue and also a return to a more parliamentary system. Erdogan's done a lot of things that give him a lot of power, and so these parties seeming to unite behind a desire to have a more parliamentary, perhaps more democratic system. But still, we don't have a necessary or an obvious contender to Erdogan, and there's a lot of time before those elections have to happen.